Barbara Hutton's name may not be as widely recognized today, but in her time, she was the epitome of wealth, scandal, and tragedy. As the Woolworth heiress, the press famously dubbed her the poor little rich girl, a title that followed her throughout her turbulent life. With a fortune that would amount to nearly $1 billion today, she was among the richest women in the world. Yet despite her vast wealth, Hutton's life was anything but charmed. Her every move was fodder for gossip columns, and her personal life unfolded like the script of a tragic film. Rivalries with other heiresses, heartbreaking losses, and a financial downfall that was as spectacular as her rise. In an attempt to reconcile her reality with public perception, she once remarked, "Money alone can't bring you happiness, but money alone has not brought me unhappiness." But when you delve into her story, you can't help but question whether she ever truly found joy. So let's explore the tragic life of Barbara Hutton. Before we start, please support my channel by clicking like and subscribe buttons. Barbara Hutton never needed to work a day in her life. She was born into extraordinary privilege as the granddaughter of Frank Woolworth, the retail magnate who built an empire of 5 and dime stores that revolutionized shopping. A self-made man, Woolworth rose from humble beginnings through sheer determination and business acumen, ultimately cementing his legacy by constructing a towering New York City skyscraper that bore his name. His fortune ensured that Barbara inherited $25 million, an astronomical sum at the time, one that should have guaranteed a life of comfort and security. But money could not shield her from heartbreak, nor could it fill the void left by a childhood marred by loss and neglect. To say that Barbara Hutton lost her mother at a young age barely scratches the surface of the trauma she endured. She was only 4 years old when tragedy struck, and the official cause, an ear infection, was what the newspapers initially reported. The truth, however, was far more harrowing. Her mother, devastated by the discovery of a love letter her husband had written to his mistress, took her own life by ingesting poison. The most haunting detail: it was young Barbara who discovered her mother's lifeless body in their suite at the Plaza Hotel. While the phrase "poor little rich girl" has been used to describe many heiresses, Barbara Hutton was the first to embody the term so completely. After her mother's death, she was thrust into a world that seemed to have little room for affection. Her father remarried a woman who was, by all accounts, a cruel and distant stepmother. Together, they treated Barbara with cold indifference, leaving her to be raised by a revolving door of nannies and governesses. By the age of 12, she was sent away to boarding school, another step in a lifetime of abandonment that would shape her desperate search for love and acceptance in the years to come. Her wealth may have afforded her palaces, jewels, and grand parties, but it could never buy her the one thing she seemed to crave the most: a sense of belonging. Boarding school offered Barbara Hutton little solace. Isolated and friendless, she spent her days adrift, ignored by classmates and seemingly forgotten by her own family. Her father and stepmother cared so little for her well-being that they left her at school, even during the holidays, even on Christmas, abandoning her to empty halls while other children went home to warmth and celebration. But just as it seemed she had no one to turn to, an unexpected source of kindness emerged. Marjorie Merriweather Post, an heiress in her own right and the owner of the now infamous Mar-a-Lago, married Barbara's uncle, Ned Hutton, and took immediate notice of the young girl's dire situation. Appalled by the cold indifference with which Barbara was treated, Post stepped in where her family had failed. She welcomed Barbara into her home, bringing her along on lavish trips and hosting her at the Grand Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. offering her the kind of affection and structure she had long been denied. But despite her aunt's best efforts, the damage was already evident. Barbara's mood swung wildly, her spending was impulsive, and even as a teenager, she had a habit of throwing tantrums that would have been expected from a much younger child. By the time Barbara turned 18, she was expected to make her grand entrance into high society, as all wealthy young women of her class did. Debutante balls were more than just glamorous affairs. They were rituals designed to announce a young woman's eligibility for marriage, complete with perfect posture, graceful dancing, and impeccable etiquette. They were also extravagant displays of wealth, reinforcing one's place among the elite. Barbara's debut should have been a glittering triumph, but the timing could not have been worse. The world was deep in the throes of the Great Depression, with millions struggling to put food on the table. Yet, amid the economic devastation, Barbara's ball became the event of the season, if for all the wrong reasons. A typical debutante ball at the time cost around $16,000, equivalent to about $200,000 today. But Barbara's celebration was in a different league entirely. She spent an astonishing $60,000, nearly $1 million in today's money, on a single night of revelry. The public was outraged. At a time when breadlines stretched for blocks and families lost everything, the spectacle of one young woman flaunting her fortune in such an ostentatious way was too much to bear. The press had a field day, branding her selfish and out of touch. To escape the scandal, Barbara was promptly sent to Europe, where the backlash could not reach her quite so easily. Barbara Hutton's search for love was as excessive as her spending. Over the course of her life, she walked down the aisle 7 times, only to walk away just as often. She married royalty, nobility, Hollywood royalty, and outright scoundrels. 3 princes, a count, a baron, a notorious playboy, and the dashing actor Cary Grant. None of them lasted. Her first husband pursued her relentlessly, trailing her across the world for years before finally persuading her to marry him when she was just 20. The union lasted 3 years. But if divorce shook her, she didn't show it. Just 24 hours after finalizing her first split, she married husband number 2. Then came Cary Grant, her third and most famous husband. When their marriage ended, Barbara declared she was done with love, vowing, "You can't go on being a fool forever." That promise lasted a mere 5 years before she was back at the altar. By the time she reached her 5th marriage, things had become almost farcical. The union lasted just 3 months. Husbands 6 and 7 fared no better, each disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. But in the end, only one of her ex-husbands left the marriage without trying to claim a piece of her fortune. That man was Cary Grant. Of all the men she had loved and lost, he remained the one she spoke of most fondly, admitting he had been her favorite. When she died, she had long since stopped chasing romance. The last 13 years of her life were spent alone, a woman who had once had everything, yet somehow ended up with nothing. For all of Barbara Hutton's tumultuous relationships, she had only one child, a son named Lance, born from her second marriage to Count Kurt von Haugwitz-Reventlow. True to form, even his birth was a media sensation. The press, unable to resist an extravagant moniker, dubbed him the world's richest baby. Raised in privilege, Lance embraced the playboy lifestyle, but found his true passion in speed. He became a successful race car driver, devoting himself entirely to the sport. So much so that his wife, actress Jill St. John, cited his obsession with racing as the reason for their divorce. Yet, in a tragic twist of fate, it wasn't the racetrack that claimed his life. In 1972, At just 36 years old, Lance boarded a small plane to survey a property he was considering purchasing. A sudden thunderstorm turned the flight fatal, sending the aircraft crashing into a mountainside. His untimely death was yet another devastating loss in his mother's already sorrowful life. For all her wealth and privilege, Barbara Hutton was plagued by demons no amount of money could silence. As a child, she struggled with her weight, a fact that shaped her lifelong insecurity about her appearance. In adulthood, this manifested as severe anorexia, a battle she fought for decades. Her physical health was just as fragile as her emotional well-being. She underwent numerous medical treatments, including kidney and intestinal surgeries, as well as cataract operations that left her with poor vision. But whether her ailments were all real is a question even those closest to her debated. Cary Grant, her third husband, was convinced she was a hypochondriac, believing that many of her treatments were unnecessary. His distrust of doctors, in fact, stemmed largely from witnessing Barbara's endless medical interventions. Yet the one time she undeniably needed medical attention, she inexplicably avoided it. In 1971, while in Rome, she tripped on a rug and broke her hip. Rather than seeking immediate treatment, she delayed, leading to complications that likely left her struggling to walk for the rest of her life. By her later years, she had developed the peculiar habit of demanding to be carried everywhere. Barbara Hutton's love of luxury was insatiable. From a young age, she developed a near-reckless habit of spending, a habit those closest to her tried and failed to curb. Mansions, extravagant parties, priceless gems, nothing was off-limits. Her jewelry collection, in particular, was legendary. She acquired most of her finest pieces from Jules Gleamser, former chairman of Cartier. Among her most famous possessions was the Vladimir tiara, adorned with emeralds that once belonged to Duchess Marie of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, a Romanov noblewoman who fled Russia after the 1917 revolution. But like so much of her fortune, the tiara did not stay with Barbara. In later years, she sold it to Van Cleef and Arpels, who dismantled it and sold the emeralds separately. If her jewelry was a costly indulgence, her marriages were an even greater financial drain. Cary Grant may have been the exception. He was the only husband who refused to take a cent from her, but the rest were all too eager to benefit from her wealth. Her first husband walked away with $2 million, and her second claimed $1.5 million. The briefest of her marriages, just 3 months, was still enough time for her husband to buy himself a fleet of polo ponies and a private plane, all on her dime. When it ended, he secured a staggering $2.5 million settlement. For a woman born into immense wealth, Barbara Hutton's final years were astonishingly bleak. By the time she died in 1979, at the age of 66, her once vast fortune had evaporated. Though she was still living at the prestigious Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills, it was an illusion of grandeur. In reality, she was nearly destitute, with just $3,500 left to her name. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to support my channel by clicking like and subscribe buttons.